Greetings, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I wanted to go over your week 10 discussion as well as the announcements and reminders for the week, for week 11. So I first want to say that everyone did a really great job of discussing the readings. And this week's topic was data analysis. And so you all did a great job of discussing chapter 7 of Effort and Rabbit, and also chapter 6 of the Mills text. Okay. So the topic is a kind of a little bit of kind of a combination of things that everyone discussed. And so I first began with chapter 7 in Effort and Rabbit in prepping for analysis. And so planning really helps avoid kind of haphazard practice of research, okay? And so it's about making sure that you have really prepped in terms of thinking ahead, in terms of how you want to analyze your data based on your data collection. And so when you develop your chapter 3, that's something that you are thinking about. This is something that you have to think about. And that's what IRB, that's the function of IRB as well, is to submit your plan for how you want to conduct your research. And so the other big reason for prepping for analysis is to ensure the ethical practice of research. So when we talk about when we discuss the ethical practice of research, we're not just talking about data collection, but we're also talking about the way in which we analyze data, as well as the way in which we discuss the findings. Okay, so planning is really important. That's why I asked you all to have those charts where you outline what's your research question, what data collection measure are you using for each one of those research questions, and then also your data analysis. That's all a way of planning and making sure that that there's a rhyme and a reason, and that everything makes sense in terms of your plan for data analysis. Okay. And so another thing too is I noticed that many of you all discussed how there's a lot of repetition involved in things that you're reading, and that every week the themes are very much the same. And so they are the same, but they are being approached from a different angle. So so one week you may be looking at these themes of around action research in terms of ethics. And another way you may be looking at these themes of action research in terms of data collection. You may be looking at it in terms of sampling and dealing with participants. You may be dealing with it like you did like in this week, where you're looking specifically at a data analysis. So the themes are the same, but the way in which they're being addressed is different from week to week. Okay. So self-reflection with regard to data analysis and data interpretation. So as you all know, I'm really huge when it comes to self-reflection, whether it is as a way to kind of check your biases, or if it's a way to ensure that you are considering all angles of analysis. Okay, but it's really important in terms of trying to retain integrity in the data analysis, as well as in the interpretation of findings. And so you have to remember that you are the researcher as instrument. Okay, so in qualitative research, the researcher is the instrument of data analysis. And so you bear a lot of responsibility in this role. And so it's really important that self-reflection is a part of that, because it helps not only to ensure that there's integrity with regards to the findings, but it's also helpful in terms of making sure that you are strengthening the trustworthiness of these findings. Okay. And I remember when I was working on my dissertation and reflecting and looking back at my bias journal, at my reflective journal, and finding points that I made within the journal that really helped in my analysis of my findings, because I was recording my thoughts after each interview, after each aspect of my data collection, and my data analysis. And so when I did, and with my dissertation, I did a mixed method study. So the first portion of my study was quantitative, and the second portion of my study was qualitative. So when I went back to look at, I'm sorry, some kind of gnat here. So when I went back to look at my quantitative findings and the notes that I had taken during that time, it really helped me. It really helped to inform how I analyze the qualitative portion of my study, because it helped me to remember certain things, certain findings that occurred during the quantitative phase that informed my knowledge of of um, of the data and of the research in a way that I wouldn't have had I not had the reflexive journal. Okay, so so there are many benefits to having a journal and in being self-reflective. So there were some questions about thematic versus chronological format. Okay, and so thematic formats are used to discuss themes that emerge from various types of qualitative research. Typically, you will see thematic analysis or thematic formats used in phenomenology and in grounded theory and ethnography. And so this is most often what you'll see in qualitative research. So typically when you look at qualitative data analysis, what you will see is a thematic analysis. And so chronological formats are used when you're describing the actual implementation of a practice, a program, a policy, or an initiative that is most often seen in qualitative research, such as narrative inquiries, okay, and self-studies. And so currently there's a doctoral student who is who is focusing her dissertation on the use of homeschooling, instructional approaches with her son, and helping to improve his literacy learning. And so so her developed instructional approach is one that she's had a process, and so she's using more of a chronological format to describe the steps by which she has implemented her instructional plan. And so she's doing this, and she's selected this approach because she knows that other parents, she knows that her potential audience could be other parents that are also educators. And so she wants to explain in a kind of a step-by-step fashion how it is that she came to develop her instructional strategies and how they've worked. And so so she's using more of a chronological format. Now she's also using a thematic format as well, and that she will have themes. She will have themes. So she is coding her data. She is categorizing it. She's coming up with themes as well. So she is using both a thematic and a chronological format. And many of you asked, is that possible? Is that doable? And so the answer to that is yes, it is doable to use the combination. Okay. And so there's a link to a really great article on the use of chronological formats in qualitative research that I placed in the email. So be sure to review that. Okay. All right. So ensuring the use of thick description. So thick description, you all read Gert's, the Gert's article, I believe that was week 9. And so the Gert's article talked about the use of thick description and the importance of thick description. I believe that was focused on cultural studies, ethnographies, and the use of thick description and the importance of that. And so thick description should include an articulation of the codes, the categories, and the themes that are generated by the analysis to provide transparency, okay, with regard to data analysis. But you also want to provide an explanation to be able to make the connections between these pieces, okay? And so often when you're conducting qualitative research, you are you're coding the data, you're taking notes, you're coding the data, you are creating categories where you're collapsing the codes into categories. And then from there, you're collapsing the categories into themes. So you're looking at how these pieces are related. Do you see a pattern here? And then you're creating these themes. Well, when you are just when you are describing your findings, you need to make sure that you provide thick description. And what does that mean? So that means that you could be using quotations. Okay, that means that you could be providing detail about the participants and their background. And so what I will tell you is that in this instance, more is better. Okay. Not less is more is more. Okay. So make sure that you include an abundance of quotes. If it's too much, then your committee will tell you to dial some of that back. But oftentimes the issues that we see serving on committees is that students are not using enough quotes or enough detail to be able to describe participants, or pulling enough from their observation journals to be able to truly substantiate their findings. And so when you provide quotes and we provide detail in qualitative research, you are substantiating your findings. Okay? It's as if in doing that, you are providing more evidence. Okay. So the visual presentation of data. So there was a lot of discussion about graphs. And so not a lot of love for scatter plots or histograms. Okay. But they all serve a purpose. And so with scatter plots, that's more of a representation of the relationship, okay, between data points. And so with the scatter plot, you can see patterns with the data, and you can see where the data is where you see more morbidity of the data. You can see if there's a linear relationship. And so that's why scatter plots are important. With histograms, you're able to look at the frequency of data. And so that's important when you really want to look at frequency distributions, and you want to get an idea of maybe the number of scores that may be a result in a certain age range. So maybe you have a group of people take a scale about weight loss habits. And so, and you want to break that up by age groups. And so that's where histograms are really helpful, because you can see what the results of the scores were, and where are those scores much more frequent in terms of age groups. Okay. So it's a better visual representation than, let's say, using a bar graph. Okay. And then you also want to be able to look at maybe the distribution of data points. Well, in doing that, box plots are really helpful. Okay, so you have the box, and then you have the whiskers, which you're able to see the way in which the numbers fall in relation to the quartiles. And so all of qualities are really important ways to present your data and to display the data. But these are also quantitative ways of displaying data. Okay. And so if you're interested in, and that there's some discussion about the difference between bar charts and histograms, just let me know if you want to talk about that. We can schedule a time during office hours and we can have a conversation. Okay. But there are other ways in which you can present the data, such as the use of line graphs and tables, charts as well. These are all really great ways to display quantitative data. It's also great ways to display data about your participants in terms of demographic information. Okay. So another great aspect of y'all's discussion was about outliers. And so there's a lot of I was really proud of you all in the discussion about outliers and what that means for the ethical practice of research. So it's really important to acknowledge outliers. Okay, do not ignore them. Do not gloss over them. If you have one, you definitely need to address it and explain it. Okay, so it's really great to situate it in comparison to, or compare it to, the other outcomes of your study. So the other findings of your study. And so So there's a definition that I provided by using SagePub, which I love their website. There's all kinds of accurate information there because essentially Sage will reach out to really famous methodologists and ask them to write up these definitions of information around the practice of research, both qualitative and quantitative. Okay. So anyway, I provided a link to a discussion about what an outlier means, and so um, outliers are typically something that you will see in terms of quantitative research, but the same holds true for qualitative research. And so outliers may be represented by the response of a participant that is inconsistent with other participants, or a case in a multiple case study, okay, that has different findings from that of the other cases. And so, for example, the program that I helped oversee, called Teach Houston, it is one of many sites in Texas. It's one of many universities in Texas that are replicating the You Teach program. Well, we're replicating a program, but we also replicate differently. And so many of the outcomes are the same across institutions, but then there are some instances where it may be a little different. And so at U of H, we have a large amount of grant funding from the National Science Foundation, where we also utilize a program called the NOIS program. And so the NOIS program has helped us to really support teachers financially in terms of providing scholarships, which has also helped us to support alumni. And so we've seen higher rates of retention because of our ability to stay connected and remain connected to alumni. And so we were seen as an outlier in that regard. And so it's important to be able to have a discussion about why is this one participant's outcomes different? Why is this one case? Why are the outcomes for this case different? Because it does help to contextualize your overall findings, and there may be something there that will help to better inform your overall findings. So mean, median, and mode, I have the information in the email, and that's just more of a review for everyone. So I'm not going to go through that, but it's very straightforward. But I will say this, and that is that mean, median, and mode are components of descriptive statistics. And so descriptive stats help to describe quantitative data. Okay, so they're used, as they're called, descriptive statistics. They're used to describe the data. Okay, and so that's the function of descriptive stats. Okay, correlation versus causation. So this was another great discussion that you all had that I found very interesting. But as many of you all stated, correlation indicates a relationship between variables. Okay, and causation goes beyond correlation to indicate an outcome is the result of a phenomena or occurrence. Okay, or an event. And so you really have to be careful to avoid citing or assigning causation when there's only sufficient evidence for a correlation. Okay, and so there's a great video that I placed in the email that also goes on to more fully explain, the difference between correlation and causation, and being careful with regards to both. Utilizing correlations and in looking for causation. Okay, so statistical versus practical significance, and so so many of you all found it very interesting, the term practical significance. The majority of folks understood what statistical significance meant, and so indicates a probability that the relationship between variables exists. Okay, many of you have heard the null hypothesis, which means that there isn't a change in the phenomena that you are observing. And so when you do a statistical analysis, what you're looking for is a change. in the relationship. So that way you can reject the null. And so, for many of you, all don't worry about any of that because that's quantitative, and you will be doing a qualitative study as your chair would have it. And so that's not something that you would necessarily, need to worry about. But it is good to know. It's good to know, about statistical significance as well as practical significance. So practical significance is in terms of practical significance in research, is what we do every day as educational researchers and as social scientists. And so with practical significance, you're looking at various factors such as cost, time, objectives. So all of these pieces are pieces that impact a study. Okay. And so with regards to statistical significance, you don't worry about these pieces, about these real world aspects of conducting research. But with regards to practical significance, you do. So for instance, it would be great if you could talk with every testing coordinator, let's say in a particular school district. But given the factor of time, okay, given the factor of cost in terms of being able to reach out to these individuals, maybe even interviewing, which means that you have to drive or you provide food, and also in looking at the potential inconvenience that may be placed on these individuals as they are testing coordinators. These are real world, factors that you have to deal with. Okay, so so you may end up localizing your study to one feeder pattern. Okay, and so that's a real world experience in terms of conducting research. So that being said, that's what practical significance deals with, and that is conducting research in real world conditions. Okay, and so practical significance is viewed as being less objective. Okay, but again, most educational research and social science research falls within the realm of practical significance. And so I will say this. Statistical significance does not guarantee practical significance, okay? Because again, these are not factors that you, when you're looking at statistical significance, you're not considering. It's not a priority to consider these real world factors, okay? But practical significance, okay? When you're looking at practical significance, you must be dealing with a data set that is statistically significant, okay? So those are some things to consider with regards to statistical significance and practical significance. All right, moving on to chapter 6 of meals. There was a lot of discussion about writing and getting feedback from critical friends, which is what I like to call it. I know that that's also something that Cam likes to call it, as well as having a circle of critical friends that can provide you feedback with regards to writing and developing your dissertation topics. Okay, and so it is important to have a cadre of folks that you can lean on to help guide your research and provide feedback on your topic. But Mills made a very good point to say that you must beware of having too many opinions. Okay, and many of you all brought this up in your own discussions, because ultimately it can muddy the waters. Okay, it can make the process much more confusing rather than streamlining the process, and it makes it much more difficult to see a kind of a clear pathway to the finish line. And you also feel compelled to integrate these suggestions of people who've given up their time to help you. And so I think what I normally suggest to students is that utilize your cadre of critical friends to help you with things like syntax and grammar and providing clarity of thought. I can't tell you how often my husband, and I had two really good friends of mine that finished from doctoral programs before I did at U of H. And so I can't tell you how often I had them read through things to make sure that it just made sense that as a layperson that they could understand what I was writing. And so we all researched various topics in education. And so my topic wasn't a topic that they had ever researched. Their topics were not areas that I had ever researched. So in a way, although we were all working on doctorate degrees, we were really only knowledgeable about our own particular area of educational research. And so it made me a layperson with regards to reading their work, and then it made me a layperson with regards to reading my work. And so I really suggest that you have this cadre of critical friends to help you with things like that. Okay. But when it comes to content, okay, when it comes to content and when it comes to methodology, I do not suggest that you look to people outside of your committee for feedback, because your committee thoroughly understands the content oftentimes, and they've helped you to develop aspects of your content, and they also understand the methodology, and with the methodology, i.e., that means how they would like for you to conduct the study. Okay. Now, on occasion, sometimes sometimes you can bring an outside of the university committee member onto the committee who may be a content expert. Okay. And so, at the U of H, I was working with admissions data, and so I conferred with the director of admissions. He was the expert on how data was collected, around the parameters of how the data was collected, and so he was a person that I would frequently speak with about the data that I was utilizing for my study. But I made sure to keep my committee members in the loop of those conversations. Okay. So that's something that I would suggest, that if you're going to do that, you make sure that you keep your committee in the loop of those conversations. And so transcription, a lot of questions around what does this mean? What does this look like? So transcription, it really pertains to creating a written record of audio files. Okay. So for instance, let's say that you conducted an interview and now you're going to transcribe those interviews. So all that really means is that you're going to listen to this audio file, and you're going to authentically record or capture what was said. Okay. So oftentimes, if you listen to podcasts, you'll see that there's a transcription of the interview or discussion available. I think with 60 Minutes, they talk a lot about, if you want the transcription, then you can call and get it, or you can email someone and get the transcription. And so it is literally a verbatim account of what was of what you heard. Okay. And so transcriptions are typically used in ethnography and in phenomenology to create a written record of meetings, and then it's also used. Transcription is also used with regards to all kinds of aspects of qualitative research involving focus groups and individual interviews. And so when you're analyzing your data, there are a number of steps to consider. And so I know that many of you all talked about, well, what does it mean to actually code? What does it mean to actually, develop or come across emergent themes? And so there are a number of steps to consider when analyzing your data, your qualitative data. And so Mills does a good job of talking about some of those steps. And so it really does begin with transcription. Okay, and as I mentioned, that's creating a verbatim written account of what you've heard in those audio files. And so it's important to do this, because as you're capturing this information and as you are converting it from an audio file to a written format, you are beginning to really familiarize yourself with the data, and you start to have an intimate knowledge of the data. Okay, there's nothing like transcribing audio files. Okay, or interviews. There's nothing like it. I have both transcribed and I've also sent files out to be transcribed. And the connection that I've had with data that I've actually transcribed is I have a much deeper knowledge of that data than information that I had transcribed. Okay, so so that's really the first step. And a lot of qualitative purists will advocate for for the researcher transcribing the data. Okay, to transcribe those audio files. But when it comes to practical significance, sometimes you don't have the time to do that, and so sometimes you send it out to be transcribed. So the next step after you transcribe the data, the next thing that you would do is you would take notes, okay, in the margins. And so there's a really great book by Johnny Saldana about coding, okay, and Johnny Saldana does a great, phenomenal job of just explaining the note-taking and coding process. And so I highly recommend that you all invest in that text, because it's going to help you with regards to your own dissertations, especially if you're doing a qualitative study. Okay, and Johnny Saldana is someone that you should be citing as you write up your chapter 3s about coding. To be honest with you, okay. So as you're taking these notes in the margins, and this is very much an iterative process. So as you're taking these notes in the margins, then you will go back, read through your notes, read through the data again, which means reading through the transcription again, and then you begin to do this kind of chunking or coding of the data. Okay, so these notes are just things that you found interesting or that you thought really stood out. And then the coding of the data is when you really begin to identify patterns. Okay, and so you use the codes to identify these patterns that you're noticing within the data. Okay, so for me, my study was about the persistence of STEM majors. So one thing that I noticed was family support. Okay, and family support could have been negative. It could have been reported as being negative. It could have been reported as being positive. But family support was something that was huge. Okay. There was information. There was a lot of discussion about navigating college. Okay, not knowing how to navigate college, a lack of knowledge around navigating college. There's a lot of discussion about transitioning, and so that being said, those were some of the codes that I used when I noticed a lot of discussion that kind of fell under these kind of umbrellas of information. Okay, and then once the coding of data has happened, you would go back through, read back through all of your data again, making sure that you've not missed any areas to code, double checking and making sure that the data that you have coded really does belong with that code and maybe not with another code, or that maybe it's not coded under more than one code, because you can have that happen too, that maybe one piece of information actually could fall under more than one code. And then you begin to take a look at those codes, and then you begin to see some more patterns, and you see connections, and then you begin to create these categories. So you then begin to collapse some of these codes into categories, and then at the very end of all this process, you begin to collapse the categories into themes. And so that's when themes begin to emerge. Okay. And so you can code based on predetermined categories or emergent categories. And so there are terms for this. There are literal qualitative terms for this, for doing this. And so a priori is predetermined, okay, and a posteriori is emergent. So basically, these are the ways in which you can code it. So you can predetermine your codes based off of the literature, okay, or you can let the codes emerge. And in all honesty, when the codes are emerging, that's also based off of your knowledge of the literature. You've read you should have thorough knowledge of the literature, and that is informing how you code. But you must be transparent, and you must state exactly how it is that you're going about your coding. Are you identifying? Are you predetermining codes, or are you not? And so you have to make that very clear. Okay. Okay. So internal and external validity. And so there's information here about that. And so internal validity is really the applicableness of the findings as it relates to the study participants. Okay, you can't generalize outside of the study or outside of the study participants. Okay, that's what internal validity pertains to, and external validity is the opposite of that. So then that's looking at the applicableness of findings outside of the study participants, and generalizability of findings extends beyond the study participants and more so to the society at large. Okay, so trustworthiness, reliability, and validity. So trustworthiness is a qualitative concept, okay, and it really pertains to reliability and validity. So if you're looking at a quantitative equivalent, trustworthiness is basically reliability and validity, okay, and so if you're looking at validity is, did you measure what you intended to measure, okay? And reliability is consistency in the results, okay, or precision, okay? And with trustworthiness, there are 4 components of trustworthiness. There's credibility, where you're looking at the confidence in truth of research findings. So it's the researcher confidence with regards to the truth of research findings. That is what credibility means. And then there's transferability, okay, which is the applicability to other contexts, okay. So the applicability of your findings to other contexts. And then confirmability, which is the degree of neutrality of the researcher's findings, okay. So the degree of objectivity that can be applied or explained. And then dependability, which is the replicability of study findings, of the study and findings, okay? And you hear me talk about this from time to time, that it's really important that the more transparent you are, then the more replicable your study becomes, okay? All right, so then the old discussion of bias, it came back again in y'all's discussion. And so there's a lot of discussion about removing bias, but I think it's not about removing bias, it is about checking your bias, okay? About checking your bias. And, and as I've said before, we cannot erase how we've come to know what we've come to know, but we can put a plan in place that ensures that our biases will not compromise the ethical practice of research or how we analyze those findings, okay? And so it's just a way of checking your bias, and that's why, again, I'd like for you all to use self-reflection journals. Another important aspect of checking bias is using member checking. Okay, so member checking is where after you transcribe the data, you then take that transcription and you share that with the study participants. And then in doing so, they will read through that transcription and they will verify if what you have there is what they intended. Okay, so that goes to the authenticity of the study findings of the data that you've collected, but it also goes to ensuring that as you were transcribing it, that you did not apply your own lens to the work of to the transcription work that you did. Okay, and that they can read through that and be able to confirm that what you have there is what they meant to say. Okay, and so as I said before, having a belief system that's what makes us who we are. Okay, and that's what makes us passionate about being educators and about doing the types of research that we're doing. And so so anyway, you all did a great job again in discussing the readings for week 10. I want to make sure that that I answer any questions that you all may have. If I didn't answer questions that y'all post to me in the videos, which I love, to make sure and you have a burning desire to know, then just make sure that you contact me during one of the office hours during the office hour time on Thursday, or what you can do is schedule time for us to Skype, or we can meet face to face. Okay. All right. So I want to go over the announcements and reminders. So, so your weekly discussion video is due on the 3rd. Okay, so I believe, so that's due on the 3rd, which is Saturday. Okay. And so discussion leaders for week 11 are to post a video, of course, to your group discussion board. Y'all know how to do all this. And so just know that that's on the 3rd. Okay. And then chapter 7 in the Mills text, that's the reading for this week. There's also a PowerPoint called Action Planning and for Educational Change that you all can read through to help you better contextualize the reading. And then continue to collect data. I think I told you all that you have this week. I know that I said that the week of the 29th was the. No, I know that I said that the week of the 22nd was the last week to collect your data and that you should finalize it. But in actuality, I gave you all an extra week. And again, this is not an assignment. I'm just making a suggestion that you should be wrapping it up this week. Okay. And so I'm saying that I think that you all needed to have an extra week because it took me a while to get feedback to you all on the proposals. Okay. Which everyone again did a great job on. And then continue recording in your reflective journal. So if you're collecting data, okay, then you should be recording in your reflective journals. When you begin to analyze your data, you should be recording in your reflective journals. Okay. So 2 assignments are in the week 11 folder. There's 1 assignment for second-year doctoral students, and that's the mock IRB application. That's due on Saturday. Okay. So that's, if you are a second-year doctoral student and beyond, then you should be working on the mock IRB, because many of you all have completed the candidacy process. And so at this point, you should be working. You should be looking ahead. And you should be using what you have created for the research proposal, what you will be creating for your final paper, and you should be using that information to create or develop your mock IRB application. And that information is in the week 11 folder, but it's also in the syllabus. Okay. And then for first-year doctoral students, okay, you will complete the city training. Okay. So that's Paul. You will complete the city training, and that is due on Saturday as well. Okay. And so make sure that you all take a look at the syllabus and all the information that's there. The city training information, Paul, that's not in the syllabus, but that is in the week 11 folder. It takes time to work through the city training, as your colleagues can tell you. So make sure that you pace yourself. Okay. And then virtual office hours. Okay. So if y'all have any questions, again, be sure to contact me, and I'll be happy to meet with you. Okay. All right. Y'all have a great week.